The crystalline spires of the Zenthari Exhibition Hall glittered under Lyrius Feast's twin suns, their fractal patterns refracting light into cascades of color that danced across the floating walkways. Alien delegates from 100 species drifted through the grand atrium, their forms as varied as the art they championed. Bioluminescent Yorvian sculptures pulsed with internal rhythms. Quantum fractals from the Mekla shifted dimensions at random intervals, and the haunting sonic tapestries of the 6E resonated with frequencies no human ear could fully comprehend. Elena Vasquez adjusted the strap of her satchel as she stepped into the hall, her boots clicking against the iridescent floor. The sound was swallowed by the cacophony of alien chatter, the hum of anti-grav platforms, and the occasional chime of a curator's approval scanner. She was the only human in attendance, a fact made painfully obvious by the way the crowd instinctively parted around her, as if her mere presence disrupted some unspoken harmony. "Ah," the Terran representative, came a voice dripping with condescension. High Scholar Vexis, a Zapirian whose silver carapace gleamed under the hall's lights, floated toward her on a disk of repulsor energy. His 4 primary eyes flicked over her, while the secondary set remained fixed on the datapad in his clawed hands. "We were beginning to think your species had declined the invitation." Elena forced a smile. Earth doesn't turn down opportunities to share its culture. Vexis' mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "Culture, yes." He gestured toward the far corner of the hall, where a single, dimly lit alcove had been cordoned off. "Your exhibit space is prepared, though I must confess, we were surprised by your submission." She followed him through the throng of delegates, ignoring the stares. A Vorac art critic, Krelian the aesthetic, if the shimmering nameplate on his thorax was to be believed, snorted as she passed, his cranial tendrils flicking in disdain. "Primitive," he muttered to a companion, loud enough for her to hear. 2-dimensional pigment on processed cellulose. Do they even understand what art is? Elena's fingers tightened around her satchel strap, but she kept walking. The alcove was smaller than promised, barely large enough for the single canvas she had brought. The painting, The Last Stand of Earth, rested on an unadorned display stand, its surface dark under the weak lighting. Vexis examined it with a tilt of his head. "Fascinating," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Your species' fixation on static imagery is curious. No interactivity, no dynamic elements." "It doesn't need them," Elena said. A ripple of laughter passed through the nearby delegates. A Mekla sculptor, their crystalline body refracting light in jagged patterns, drifted closer. "It's a relic," they chimed, their voice a harmonic oscillation. "The Galactic Art Summit celebrates innovation. This is nostalgia." Krelian stepped forward, his neural evaluator, a sleek device grafted into his forearm, humming to life. "Let us see what the great human masterpiece has to offer," he said, extending the scanner toward the painting. "Perhaps there is some hidden depth we've missed." The evaluator's beam washed over the canvas, its pale light illuminating the brushstrokes for a brief moment before flickering. Krelian's cranial tendrils stiffened. The scanner's display, visible as a hologram above his arm, flashed a series of rapid warnings, unreadable to Elena, but the sudden tension in the Vorac's posture was unmistakable. "What is this?" Krelian hissed, his voice modulator crackling. Elena folded her arms. "Art," the scanner's warnings intensified. Krelian took a step back, his tendrils now a deep, agitated crimson. The delegates nearby fell silent, their attention snapping to the unfolding scene. High Scholar Vexis frowned. "Krelian, what is the matter?" The Vorac's voice was barely a whisper. This is not art." His tendrils trembled. "This is a weapon." The hall erupted into murmurs. Elena didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply watched as the realization spread through the crowd like wildfire as the first alarms began to sound in the distance. And then, with the faintest smile, She reached into her satchel and pressed a single button. Somewhere deep in the painting, something awoke. The grand hall hummed with the energy of 1,000 alien voices, their languages blending into a discordant symphony that echoed off the crystalline walls. Elena Vasquez adjusted the lapels of her simple black suit, her fingers brushing against the Earthgov insignia pinned there. The human exhibit was easy to find. Just follow the laughter. A group of Vorac art critics clustered around her display, their segmented limbs gesturing dismissively at the single canvas mounted on the wall. The painting was modest by galactic standards. No shifting dimensions, no psychic resonance fields, just pigment on stretched fabric. Primitive, sneered Krelian the aesthetic, his cranial tendrils rippling with disdain. Flat, dead, no neural stimulation, no quantum entanglement, just color. His mandibles clacked in amusement as he turned to his companions. Tell me, human, did your species run out of technology before you discovered art? Elena kept her expression neutral, though her knuckles whitened around the datapad in her hand. It is called The Last Stand of Earth, she said, a historical piece. A Zapirian curator drifted closer on anti-grav repulsors, her translucent robes shimmering. High Scholar Vexis had been the one to relegate humanity's exhibit to this dim corner, far from the main galleries. Historical, she echoed, her voice like wind chimes. You mean fictional? The Vorac Collective has no records of such a battle. Elena smiled. No, you wouldn't. Krelian snorted, a wet sound from his respiratory vents. Let's see what your primitive art scores on the aesthetic scale. He produced a neural evaluator, a sleek silver device used by the Vorac to quantify artistic merit. The tool emitted a soft chime as it scanned the painting. For a moment, nothing happened. The Vorac's tendrils flicked in amusement. As expected, zero neural engagement. Not even a... The device shrieked. Krelian staggered back as the evaluator's display exploded with crimson warnings. His cranial tendrils flared violently, shifting from mocking blue to panic scarlet. The other Vorac recoiled, their own appendages twitching in alarm. What is this? Krelian hissed, his voice modulator glitching. What have you done? Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The painting changed. Where before there had been a simple battlefield, human soldiers standing against an unseen foe, the image unfolded. Layers upon layers of hidden detail emerged under the evaluator's deep spectrum scan. The sky cracked open, revealing not stars but ships, human warships, their hulls scarred and burning, locked in a desperate battle against a Vorac dreadnought. The USN Defiance banked hard, its railguns firing in silent fury. The USN Atlantica listed to port, her engines flaring as she rammed a Vorac cruiser, and at the center of it all, a single figure, a human officer standing on the bridge of a dying ship, her hand raised not in surrender, but defiance. Krelian's evaluator shattered in his grip. This isn't art, he whispered. This is a battle record. The Zapirians had gone utterly still. High Scholar Vexis robes flickered with emergency hues. Impossible, she breathed. No species encodes tactical data in pigment. Elena tilted her head. We do. The Vorac were backing away now, their confidence crumbling. Krelian's voice was barely audible over the sudden murmurs spreading through the hall. You hid this, in plain sight. Elena's smile didn't reach her eyes. You called it worthless. We called it insurance. The neural evaluator's final reading flashed once before dying. Warning: mimetic hazard detected, cognitive integrity compromised, terminating scan. And then the alarms began to sound. Krelian's cranial tendrils twitched as the neural evaluator completed its scan. The Vorac art critic had expected nothing more than primitive pigment on canvas. Flat, lifeless strokes from a species that hadn't even mastered quantum aesthetics. His mandibles clicked in derision as the first layer resolved on his ocular display. Then the second layer activated. Krelian's entire exoskeleton stiffened. His 4 primary eyes dilated simultaneously, their lenses whirring as they struggled to process the data flood. The painting, The Last Stand of Earth, wasn't just pigment, it was a codex. What in the name of the first hive? The canvas shimmered, its oils rearranging at the molecular level. Brushstrokes became schematics. Color gradients resolved into tactical overlays. The flat, dead colors the Vorac had mocked now pulsed with the unmistakable signatures of human warships: USN Defiance, USN Atlantica, locked in combat against a Vorac dreadnought. Elena Vasquez stood motionless beside her exhibit, her hands clasped behind her back. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just watched as Krelian's neural evaluator began emitting frantic warning chimes. This is impossible, Krelian stammered, his voice modulator crackling with static. These are classified engagement records from the Battle of Proxima Centauri. His tendrils flared crimson, the Vorac equivalent of panic. How did your species obtain our fleet formations? Our shield harmonics? The evaluator screeched as it hit the third layer. The painting moved, not as a hologram, not as some crude alien projection. The human warships banked across the canvas, their thrusters flaring with impossible precision. The Vorac dreadnought's silhouette fractured under a barrage of railgun fire, exactly as it had in the actual battle. Krelian staggered back, his chitinous legs buckling. "This isn't art," he whispered. "This is a battle simulation." A crowd had gathered now, Zapirian scholars, Vorac aesthetes, even a few curious Cerebrians with their floating ocular nodes pulsing in alarm. High Scholar Vexis pushed through the throng, her bioluminescent frills flaring in agitation. What is the meaning of this disruption? Krelian whirled on her, his evaluator still projecting the unfolding battle. "They've weaponized pigment." Vexis's frills darkened to an angry violet as she studied the display. Her own neural interface synced with the evaluator and froze mid-scan. "By the eternal archives," she breathed. "This isn't just a recording, it is adaptive." Elena finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured. "Oil paint has memory," she said. "Every stroke contains data. Every pigment particle is a processor." The crowd murmured. A Cerebrian's ocular nodes contracted in disbelief. Preposterous. Organic compounds cannot achieve that level of "The Last Stand of Earth" isn't a painting, Elena continued. It is an archive, a living record of every engagement between human and Vorac forces, updated in real time. Krelian's evaluator chimed again. A new signature resolved on the canvas, a Vorac scout ship, right now, entering the Sol system. The painting adjusted, its colors shifting to display the ship's trajectory. Vexis's frills went completely black. "You've been spying on us." Elena shook her head. "We didn't have to. You broadcast your fleet movements every time you entered a gravity. Well, your ships leave gravitational brushstrokes." She gestured to the painting. "We just learned to read them." The crowd erupted. Vorac aesthetes clicked their mandibles in alarm. Zapirian scholars activated emergency data quarantines. Krelian's evaluator overloaded, sending sparks skittering across the polished crystal floor. Then the painting did something new. The USN Defiance, painted in stark blacks and grays, turned toward the viewer, its railgun batteries aligned. For one impossible moment, every alien in the gallery felt the warship's targeting systems lock onto them. Krelian's voice modulator failed entirely. His subvocal clicks translated as sheer panic. This is not art. This is a weapon." Elena smiled for the first time. "No," she said softly. "It is a warning." The Defiance fired on the canvas, the railgun round streaked toward the viewer and stopped, frozen. A single brushstroke of impending annihilation, silence. Then every Vorac in the gallery simultaneously received a priority alert. Their cranial implants lit up with emergency transmissions, scrambled fleet signals, panicked distress calls. Krelian was the first to understand. He turned to Elena, his tendrils limp with shock. You've infected our networks. Elena tilted her head. Art is meant to be shared. The alarms started blaring. The debate chamber of the Federation Art Council pulsed with panic. The crystalline walls, designed to amplify the beauty of artistic discourse, now reflected only fear. Emergency protocols flickered through the air, casting jagged shadows across the assembled delegates. High Scholar Vexis, her Zapirian frills flared in agitation, slammed a six-fingered hand onto the resonance table. This is an outrage. Her voice modulator crackled with static. Humanity has violated every tenet of artistic purity. Around her, the other delegates murmured in agreement. The Vorac contingent, their exoskeletons dulled to a defensive grey, clustered together like a living barricade. Krelian, the aesthetic, stood apart, his cranial tendrils still flickering crimson from the neural shock. He clutched the data tablet containing the scan of Elena's painting as if it might explode. "It's not just one piece," Krelian said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The patterns, they're recursive. Every human artwork we've ever archived, every song, every sculpture, contains the same embedded signatures." A hush fell over the chamber. The implications hung in the air like a blade. Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the room, flanked by two hulking Vorac enforcers. Her wrists were bound with neural suppressors, but her chin was high. The aliens had confiscated her comms, stripped her of her exhibit, but they hadn't taken her defiance. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Elena said. Vexis whirled on her, frills vibrating with fury. "Silence, primitive. Your kind has desecrated the sanctity of art." Elena laughed. The sound was sharp, unexpected. "Sanctity? You turned galleries into trophies, music into currency. You never understood art, you just collected it." The Vorac High Curator, a scarred elder named Drassic, stepped forward. His mandibles clicked in agitation. "Enough. The human's work is a weapon, a hidden weapon. This is an act of war." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Cerelian delegate, a willowy being of shifting light, pulsed with alarm. "Then the solution is clear. All human art must be confiscated, destroyed." Elena's smile didn't waver. "Good luck with that." Vexis gestured to the enforcers. "Take her to the containment vault. We'll extract what she knows." The Vorac seized Elena's arms, their claws digging into her skin. She didn't struggle. As they dragged her toward the exit, she turned her head, just enough to meet Krelian's gaze. "You should have looked closer," she said. Krelian's tendrils twitched. Something in her tone, something final, sent a chill through his exoskeleton. He glanced down at the tablet in his hands. The scan of the last stand of Earth still glowed on the screen. The hidden layers of the painting now fully revealed. Human warships, sleek and deadly, locked in battle against a Vorac dreadnought. But there was something else, something he hadn't noticed before. A signature. Not Elena's. A series of coordinates, etched in. His tendrils flared white. Wait, the chamber doors hissed shut behind Elena. Across the galaxy, in museums and private collections, in data archives and public displays, every piece of human art ever catalogued by the Federation began to hum. In the grand hall of the Zapirian art nexus, a centuries-old Terran symphony crackled to life. The melody, long dismissed as simplistic, unfolded into a razor-sharp encryption key. Security drones twitched, their targeting systems overwritten by the music's hidden code. On the Vorac homeworld, a mural of Earth's mountains shimmered. The paint moved, revealing the sleek silhouette of a cloaked warship. And in the depths of the Federation's central data core, A single line of human poetry, archived as a curiosity, unspooled into a viral command. Do not go gentle. Alarms blared, lights flickered. High Scholar Vexis spun toward the chamber's main display, her frills rigid with horror. The galactic defense grid flared red. Report, she demanded. A Cerelian technician, their luminous body flashing with distress, stammered. The human artifacts, they're activating. Krelian stared at the tablet in his hands. The painting's hidden layers were spreading, the coordinates solidifying into a tactical overlay. A fleet, a hidden fleet. He looked up, his voice hollow. We were wrong. The chamber shook somewhere. Far away, the first human warship slipped free of its canvas. The alarm started on Zenthari Prime first. The Vorac Art Vault's security drones twitched in mid-air, their targeting arrays flickering from threat, assessment gold to human blood crimson. The curator on duty, a minor functionary named Driss Fay, barely had time to register the change before his own neural implants began playing Bol Pharaoh at full volume. The exact symphony that had played during Elena Vasquez's detainment hearing. His mandibles spasmed as the music rewrote his security protocols. Across the galaxy, the infection spread. On the luxury orbiter Symphony of the Stars, a Zapirian noble's prized Van Gogh replica shimmered, then projected a perfect hologram of the USN Defiance's railgun specifications into his wine glass. The vintage turned to ash in his mouth as the ship's AI whispered through his comms. You admired the brushstrokes. You ignored the battle plans. Elena sat cross-legged in her detention cell, humming. The Vorac guards had stripped her of everything except the nanopaint under her fingernails, tiny flecks of the last stand's pigment. She watched them now, swirling in the air like fireflies. You really shouldn't have scanned the painting, she told the warden. The warden, a hulking Vorac named Creal, snorted. Your primitive colors are harmless. Elena smiled as the first explosion rocked the facility. Oil paint, she corrected, is just chemistry waiting to happen. The USN Black Gallery awoke in fragments across 100 worlds. On New Caravaggio Station, a child's finger painting of a sunset bloomed into a perfect tactical map of the Vorac supply lines. In the methane oceans of Kelthar, a sunken statue of David opened its eyes and transmitted the access codes for the planetary defense grid. Krelian the aesthetic staggered through the halls of the Zenthari Exhibition, his cranial tendrils burning with emergency alerts. Every screen showed the same nightmare. Vorac warships turning their guns on each other, their targeting systems jammed by the Mona Lisa's smile. How? He demanded, grabbing a fleeing technician. How did they weaponize art? The technician's eyes were glazed, his pupils dilated by the Fey overture pounding through his skull. They didn't weaponize it, he gasped. They built it this way. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Ryan Blake watched the carnage unfold. His tactical display wasn't a hologram. It was a living, breathing, starry night, each swirl of Van Gogh's brush marking an enemy ship's destruction. Status of the Atlantica? He asked. His XO Commander Lee tapped a finger against her tablet, which now displayed the scream every time a Vorac vessel exploded. Hidden in a Banksy on their homeworld, sir, the graffiti just peeled off the wall. Elena's nanopaint reached the detention center's ventilation system. Krell coughed as the air turned thick with the scent of linseed oil and gunpowder. What is this? He growled. Impressionism, Elena said, as the walls dissolved into a perfect replica of the Defiance's armory. The last thing Krell saw was her hand reaching through the canvas, holding a very real plasma pistol. High Scholar Vexis screamed orders into the Federation comms, but the channels were jammed with Ride of the Valkyries. Shut it down, she ordered. Purge all human cultural databases. Her aide trembled. Scholar, we can't. Our own archives are fighting back. Vexis whirled to see the Federation's central AI, a masterpiece of Zapirian engineering, projecting Guernica across every screen. The twisted figures reached out, grabbing Vorac data streams and snapping them like twigs. On Lirius, Faye, the ground shook as the Defiance tore through the atmosphere, its hull gleaming with Elena's signature. The Vorac fleet scrambled to intercept, but their targeting locks slipped away, distracted by the perfect beauty of the ship's prow, which curved like a Renaissance Madonna's cheek. Captain Blake opened a channel to the entire galaxy. His face appeared on every screen, every hologram, every scrap of human-made art. "You called it worthless," he said. "The Defiance's guns charged with the sound of 1,000 violins. We call it vengeance." Elena stepped through her cells, ruined wall, brushing flecks of Kral's exoskeleton from her shoulders. The detention center's alarms warbled like a badly tuned orchestra. She picked up a fallen Vorac rifle, then paused to admire the way the emergency lights made the metal gleam like a Caravaggio. "Art Appreciation Lesson 1, she murmured, priming the weapon. "Always check the frame for explosives." The Black Gallery's final piece unfolded above the Vorac homeworld, a perfect, planet-sized replica of the Last Stand, painted in the fire of 1,000 surrendering warships. The Vorac command ship Eviscerator shuddered as its targeting arrays flickered. Admiral Zorath's claws dug into his command throne. "Why aren't we firing?" he roared. The tactical officer's frills turned pale yellow with fear. "Our systems, they see no threat, only beauty." On the bridge of the USN Defiance, Captain Ryan Blake watched the Vorac fleet drift in confusion. His fingers traced the edge of the tactical display, where Elena's signature glowed faintly beneath the console. "All ships, prepare final approach." The Defiance emerged from the stellar background like a brushstroke given form, its angular hull shimmering with colors no alien eye could process without pain. Behind it, the rest of the Black Gallery fleet materialized, cruisers shaped like sonnets, destroyers that pulsed with hidden rhythms. "Admiral," screamed a Vorac sensor tech, "their vessels, they're changing." Zorath's compound eyes reflected the impossible sight as the human ships unfolded. The Defiance's prow elongated into a razor-edged quill, its flanks revealing galleries of missile pods disguised as musical notation. "Target manually," Zorath ordered. "Override the systems." Aboard the Defiance, Weapons Officer Chen grinned. "They're trying to eyeball it, Skipper." Blake nodded. "Let them see." The first volley from the Eviscerator went wide, plasma bolts curving away as if repelled by some unseen force. The Vorac gunners targeting lasers skittered across the Defiance's hull, unable to lock on. "Report," Zorath demanded. It is like trying to shoot a sunset," the weapons officer stammered. "Our systems refuse to acknowledge them as threats." Blake's voice cut across the chaos as the Defiance's comms activated galaxy wide. "Vorac Collective, Zapirian Art Council. You called our art worthless. You called it primitive." The Defiance's main batteries glowed crimson. "We call this vengeance." The first salvo struck the Eviscerator amidships, plasma torpedoes shaped like perfect haikus. The Vorac shields flared and died, their frequency patterns undone by harmonic resonance. "Return fire," Zorath screamed. A single Vorac railgun managed a desperate shot. The projectile streaked toward the Defiance, only to veer abruptly and embed itself in the Eviscerator's own engine nacelles. Chen whooped. "They just shot themselves." Blake didn't smile. "All ships, execute final stroke." Across the battlefield, human vessels began to sing. The USN Atlantica broadcast an ancient Terran symphony through its thrusters, the vibrations shattering Vorac sensor arrays. The destroyer Sonnet pulsed with strobes that induced seizures in compound-eyed species. Zorath clutched his head as his neural implants rebelled, flooding his mind with images of Earth's lost cities. "Make it stop," he begged. On Lirius, Elena Vasquez watched from her detention cell as the sky turned to canvas. The Defiance's main gun charged, a particle beam shaped like Van Gogh's Starry Night. The Vorac fleet scattered, their formations unraveling like poorly composed verse. Ship after ship drifted helplessly, their crews incapacitated by beauty they couldn't process. Zorath's final transmission was a whisper. "What are you?" Blake's reply echoed across the stars. "The artist's hand." The Defiance fired. The beam struck the eviscerator not as destruction, but as revelation. The dreadnought's hull became a mirror, reflecting every atrocity the Vorac had committed, now visible to the entire galaxy. Zorath screamed as his own crime stared back at him. His ship tore itself apart, the crew turning weapons on each other in madness. Across the system, Vorac ships surrendered or fled. The few that resisted found their systems hijacked by viral lullabies embedded in human transmissions decades earlier. Blake watched the last Vorac cruiser power down, its weapons silent. "Elena," her voice came through, weak but triumphant. "I'm here, good." Blake turned to his crew. "Prep the cultural victory package. Time to show the galaxy what happens when you insult human creativity." The Defiance's hangar bays opened, releasing thousands of data pods containing Earth's greatest works, each one a sleeper agent waiting for its moment. Across the Federation, alien systems began to play Ode to Joy, and the galaxy listened. The crystalline spires of the Zenthari Exhibition Hall lay in ruins, their once pristine surfaces now fractured and blackened. The air smelled of ionized metal and something the Vorac had no word for: regret. Elena Vasquez walked through the debris, her boots crunching on shattered holographic displays that had once showcased the galaxy's so-called masterpieces. A contingent of Zapirian scholars huddled near the remains of their debate chamber, their translucent skin dull with fear. High Scholar Vexis stood apart, his cranial ridges twitching as he watched Elena approach. Behind her, the USN Defiance loomed in the sky, its hull gleaming with the same brushstrokes that had once adorned her painting. "You lied," Vexis hissed, his voice modulator crackling. "You disguised warfare as art." Elena tilted her head, examining the half-melted frame of her painting, now restored and hanging amidst the wreckage. "No," she said softly. "We elevated warfare to art." A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. Krelian the aesthetic, his cranial tendrils now permanently singed crimson, stepped forward. "The neural patterns embedded in your pigments. They hijacked our systems. Our own drones turned against us." "How?" Captain Ryan Blake descended the Defiance's ramp, his armor still streaked with the residue of battle. "Because you underestimated the human mind," he said, his voice carrying across the ruined hall. "You thought our art was passive, decorative, but every stroke, every note, every line, it was a code." Vexis shuddered. "A code for what?" Elena reached out, tracing the edge of her painting. The canvas shimmered, revealing the hidden layers once more: the battlefield, the warships, the Defiance. "For this," she said, "for the moment you finally saw us." A Vorac delegate, his exoskeleton cracked from the fighting, limped forward. "We surrendered. Our fleets are disabled. What more do you want?" Blake crossed his arms. "Recognition." Silence fell. The aliens exchanged glances, their various appendages twitching in discomfort. Finally, Vexis straightened, his voice barely above a whisper. "And if we refuse?" Elena smiled. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the painting. With a flick of her wrist, the image shifted again, this time to a star map. Hundreds of systems lit up, each marked with a tiny glowing signature: human art, hidden in museums, private collections, even the Vorac's own vaults. Krelian's tendrils went rigid. You couldn't have." "Oh, we did," Blake said. "Every piece you've ever collected, every song you've archived, every sculpture you've admired, They're all loaded. The Zapirians recoiled. Vex's voice trembled. You would destroy the entire galaxy over pride. Elena's smile faded. No, we'd destroy it over respect. She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto Vex's. But we won't, because now you'll give it to us. The Defiance's engines hummed overhead, a quiet reminder of the power behind her words. The aliens stood frozen, their arrogance finally shattered. Vex's bowed his head. What do you propose? Blake nodded to Elena. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small data chip. The treaty, she said, placing it into the frame of her painting. The canvas absorbed it, the words etching themselves into the battlefield like a final, triumphant stroke. Sign it, Blake said, or we finish what we started. One by one, the delegates approached. The Vorac pressed a claw to the frame. The Zapirians brushed it with a tentacle. The others followed, their submissions flickering across the canvas like signatures on an ancient contract. When it was done, Elena stepped back. The painting sealed itself, the treaty now part of its hidden layers, forever preserved. Vexis stared at it, his voice hollow. All this hidden in art. Elena turned to leave, her boots clicking against the broken crystal. Art is always a weapon, she said over her shoulder. You just didn't understand the war. The Defiance's engines roared to life, lifting her and Blake into the sky. Below, the aliens stood amidst the ruins of their arrogance, staring at the painting that had brought them to their knees. And for the first time in galactic history, they finally understood human creativity. It terrified them.